Hello, you are with Ahval, and we are on an interview with Gökhan Bacık, Old and New Turkey. It is a developing story, rapidly moving target, and especially in the past days, everything seems accelerated with high speed in major issues. We have seen first the HDP deputy Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu being stripped off his parliamentary seat and immunity. After 2 or 3 days of vigil, he was this morning, today is Sunday, March 21, this morning, just before his first morning prayer from the bathroom taken by the police. The parliament itself was raided by around 100 policemen. And we have some footage from that, especially in the part that where he was taken away with his morning clothes. And the second one is, of course, the HDP, pro-Kurdish HDP party closure case against it. More than 100-page long indictment filed by chief prosecutor, in which also 687 currently politically active people are to be banned from political activity, at least for 5 years. Another development is, of course, the famous Gezi Park, which belonged to the greater municipality of Istanbul, is now taken away from the jurisdiction of Istanbul municipality and given to a sort of a religious foundation, which will run all the operations and projects on it. And also another development is, of course, Istanbul Convention, a famous convention which aimed at protecting women and people with different sexual inclinations from violence. And that caused also protests. And also another thing is, it's a major development as well. Central Bank governor Naci Ağbal sacked, being replaced by a 100% loyal person to Erdoğan. So all these issues are major per se, including Gezi Park, and we will speak about this. Normally, Gökhan and I, we are speaking about more historic issues or cultural issues, but this one is under extraordinary circumstances, important to analyze. Welcome, Gökhan.
Hello, Yavuz.
After this long introduction, which was, I think, necessary,
Yep.
Let's go into this. How do you, point by point, explain this to our viewers?
I think the main reason is Erdoğan is no longer satisfied with the existing nature of authoritarian regime. Probably, I could say it since 2014 and 15, Turkey has been in a state of competitive authoritarian regime. But
up until when? Up until when, approximately?
Since 2014, 13, it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly the dates, but there's no doubt that there's a scholarly consensus about the nature of regime in Turkey, which reads it as a typical example of competitive authoritarianism. But because of several reasons, it's no longer satisfactory, and Erdoğan, I think, realized it after when he lost Istanbul elections. So he has two options. One is to solve the problems, which virtually impossible. Mainly, economy is completely out of control. Probably.
By the way, local elections, to clarify, 2019.
19, that's right. Yeah, he realized that
summer of 19.
Yeah,
yes.
Because
spring and summer.
From our perspective, local elections is critical because it proved that Erdoğan cannot win local elections even in a competitive authoritarian, which means that the general situation in Turkey is such bad. And probably we should emphasize for our foreign audience, I don't think it's correctly to name what's happening in Turkey in terms of economy as a crisis. It's more than crisis. It's a structural collapse of Turkish economy. Turkey is no longer able to produce. That's why asking foreign with high interest rate. That's right. So So Erdoğan is in a tough situation. If you are not able to solve your problems, you should go in the direction of more authoritarianism. So I think last week, it's now clear that Turkey is entering or heading to a new phase of authoritarianism, that is hegemonic authoritarianism. So what is it? Very briefly, first, in hegemonic authoritarianism, Yavuz, the institutions stay, but they are now function of political power. So still there is a constitutional court in Turkey, there is a parliament, but they're not independent. They act, and they will act mainly in the name of Erdogan's power. And it's exactly.
So we are talking about no longer separation of powers,
That's
but
right.
unity of powers.
That's correct.
But wasn't that a fact before? Is that,
no, well, of course. I mean, I'm not making a very radical shift, but this is going to be very, very visible, very, very, very strong.
More exposed.
That's right, exposed. So, of course, during the competitive authoritarianism, we were observing the erosion of their independence, but de facto in hegemonic authoritarian regime, Supreme Court is a branch of government right now.
Supreme Court, constitutional
That's
court.
Right. Constitutional court is a branch of government. The parliament is a branch of government. So they are there just to endorse, just like we have such institutions also in other very authoritarian countries. So we don't have that competitive aspect. Of course, we will have some exceptional decisions probably for makeup. Okay. But to a large extent, and plus, we will see some aggressive interventions into elections. The law, gerrymandering, changing, or not letting the parties running properly in the elections. So the logic of hegemonic authoritarianism is, you know exactly that it's now only authoritarianism that you can survive. So this is the new phase of Turkish authoritarianism.
Hardened regime.
That's right.
In other words.
On the other hand, what we have as hegemonic authoritarianism is a natural consequence of the new ideological doctrine or official ideology of Turkey, because we have two main parties, ultra-nationalist party and Erdogan's AKP. One is Islamist, the other is ultra-nationalist.
And pan-Turanist.
Both are ultra-right party. That's right. Sorry?
Pan-Turanist as well.
Yeah,
ultra-nationalist and pan-Turanist.
Yeah. But what is common, they, in theory, both don't like the idea of separation of power. So if you analyze them in terms of their intellectual arguments, I should summarize both as the leader and the nation. Okay, this is so this is something they are happy about, that the ultra phase of Turkish populism. I mean, bureaucracy, constitutional court, too much detail. So those two ideologies are always happy to put the whole state mechanism into the strict hierarchy of the leader and the nation. So on the other hand, of course, they are, because of the problems that Erdogan regime has been facing, mainly the economic collapse, but also a perfect consequences or reflection of the new ideology of new Turkey.
Okay, but we are still speaking of a sort of a sudden sharp threshold seemingly being passed in the past days. As I said, the Gergerlioğlu case, HDP closure case, Gezi Park, and central bank episode, and Istanbul Convention being abandoned, being abolished or left out. What I'm going to ask you the question just before this interview, a foreign colleague asked me, simple but important question. How do you explain this change, these series of decisions, steps, moves? What prompted Erdoğan and his partner Bahçeli to launch these steps? What is the reason? What is the rationale? Because my colleague had hard time rationalizing this.
Well, I think Erdoğan is a very good follower of polls, surveys, and he has enormous ability to observe Turkish society. He knows economy better than us in terms of what's going to happen. He knows his limits. So he has concluded that the only way to survive is extreme authoritarianism, extreme cultural politics. Very clear. So he has no room left, okay? So he can no longer speculate about economy. So step by step, he sacked the head of central bank because he should start another credit boom period. even it's gonna worsen economic situation, he doesn't care about that. He's now short-term guy, Erdogan. So probably he's thinking about a kind of political process which will end up with an election. I don't know when, but he must keep the people, the constituency, economy, with the idea of Erdogan is still giving something to the market. Okay, and this is and we shouldn't forget that if I am asked to explain from the perspective of economic dynamics how he has managed in the elections, in the last 3 elections, that the credit boom. And Naci Ağbal made a historic mistake. He moved the direction
Naci Ağbal being the sacked central bank governor.
Governor of central bank, because he get a bit close to orthodox economy. Orthodox economy, let me practice into political narrative, means Erdogan, you're going to lose the elections. So the only way is Erdogan needs, and that's not only about sacking the governor, appointing another loyalist. He's putting enormous pressure to banks. He wants them to act as the agents of government. So there are many, many direct interventions into market economy. Many of them are not visible. The second is he, of course, had the Kurdish party. The calculus is very clear here. Erdogan either should pull Kurdish party out of the opposition bloc, or he should stop the party entering into politics. Or maybe he must create a political setting where a Kurdish party could join the elections, but in a very weak condition. So he's trying to do, it's very simple. So his ideal expectation is an election without Kurdish deputies, no doubt. But if it is not possible, to make it maybe through independence. Or if it is not possible, okay. But
independence meaning?
Maybe independent Kurdish candidates with other, okay. But even if it's not possible, he will try for a setting where a Kurdish party might be part of the electoral process, but in a very, very tough conditions, in a very difficult conditions, maybe having no money, a lot of authoritarianism in the region. So this is what I'm trying to explain as hegemonic authoritarianism. So he is directly targeting the Kurdish party because the calculus is very clear. As long as the Kurdish party is with the opposition parties and still popular in this way, it's very unlikely for Erdogan to get 50+1 in any kind of election. When it comes to Istanbul Convention,
that's important because look, challenging HDP through a closure case, etc., is basically challenging its nearly 6 million or about 6 million voters, third largest party in parliament. But the Istanbul Convention is a bigger story in terms of sociology, because you are basically confronting half of the electorate, women.
That is true, but there are some gains for Erdogan. The first gain is Erdogan is a populist. He knows that he can survive through grand debates which divides Turkey through nationalism and Islam. So Istanbul Convention gives a lot of energy to Erdogan because after reading the reactions from conservative circles, they quickly, as Erdogan expected, read the case as another tension, just like maybe not like headscarf, but like that, okay, not in the same scale. So Erdogan using that as a new subject to consolidate the Islamic constituency.
The subject meaning the lifting or abolishing Istanbul Convention for Turkey.
And also Erdogan has been following another very, let's say, interesting agenda towards the small Islamist party, Saadet Partisi, which is with now in the opposition bloc. Erdogan is in contact with its leaders and trying to at least pull that party out of opposition bloc. If maybe the ideal scenario in his mind is to arrange that party along with this, just like a Nationalist Action Party. So I think that is a strong...
But Gökhan, let me interrupt you there. We are talking in terms of SP, Saadet Partisi, Felicity Party. We are talking about 1 or 2% of the vote. I mean, it's currently a seemingly insignificant party. Is that a big deal?
First of all, normally I would say no, but Yavuz, we are now in a presidential system. The key point is to get 50+. So any 1% is critical, because in a perfect balance, even the small size of electoral vote may change the whole. This is the balance. The second is Saadet Partisi, the Felicity Party, is small, but it has the political ability to legitimize opposition, mainly Kemalist party, because they are with Kemalist party from an Islamic perspective. So as long as Saadet Partisi is with the Kemalist party, CHP has a chance to justify itself.
Or main opposition party,
that's right.
CHP.
Otherwise, yes. Erdogan wants CHP to label as Islam versus secularism, Islam versus, let's say, anti-Islamism, maybe I should say that. But as long as this small party, Saadet Partisi, Felicist Party, stay with CHP, the Kemalist party, Erdogan cannot use that populist jargon, because Saadet Partisi is a typical moderate Islamist party. Maybe I should make this in this way. If Erdogan is neo-Islamism, Saadet is traditional Islamism. So Erdogan is neo-Islamism. So Saadet Partisi is small, but it has huge ability to legitimize Kemalist party in the eyes of large conservative people. Many people, when they see Mr. Karamollaoğlu, the head of Saadet Partisi, sitting, speaking with Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, the leader of CHP, then it's a highly symbolic. So Erdogan is not happy about that. Erdogan wants to create, or let me put it in this way, wants to present the opposition bloc in a way against religion, against Turkish nationalism. So it's a club of seculars, club of PKK lovers, if I may use that term from that. So that's why he's very sensitive about that. I mean, persuading those groups, even they are small, and it also helped Erdogan, especially in defeating some small challengers led by Davutoğlu, Babacan. Also, their constituents are very much sensitive on religious issues.
I see. It's really, it seems like a meticulous political engineering underway. So what you're saying is basically, by way of confronting HDP, pro-Kurdish party, and the movement itself and its grassroots, and by lifting Istanbul Convention on Turkey's part, he's approaching or embracing or willing to embrace Felicity Party and its conservative Sunni voter base. All this together is done in order to weaken the opposition bloc, or prevent the opposition bloc getting stronger, because it's a composite structure at the, as Erdogan saw it, and legitimizing each other. The Kurdish party legitimizing the centrists, center-right, E Party, Meral Akşener's party, Kemalist party, CHP, and the Felicity Party, as we spoke, as sort of linked, merged with that loosely, but still. So the aim is basically keeping the opposition as weak as possible in terms of facing any challenge in any election soon. You were saying something.
I was saying that because the Erdogan, the coalition led by Erdogan is ideologically very much homogeneous. It's ultra-nationalist and Islamist, so it's difficult to weaken that part. Whereas the opposition bloc has only a few commons, and the main common they share is they don't like Erdogan. This is a Kemalist party, which is nationalist Kemalist. A lot of people hate Islam. A lot of people hate Kurdish issue. We have the Kurdish party.
Secularists,
That's right, secularists. We have the Saadet Partisi, Islamist people who are very much critical and sensitive about many issues such as gay and lesbian. So logically speaking, it is difficult to keep the opposition together. So Erdogan, instead of targeting them en bloc, trying to focus them one by one. So his strategy is to weaken that opposition bloc. By using Kurdish issue, the target is the good party, moderate nationalist party. By using Islamic issues such as Istanbul Convention is targeting the Saadet Partisi. Maybe we should remember, if you remember, Yavuz, it was, I forget the exact year, but it was Erdogan came up with a new idea of government and putting Tuğrul Türkeş as the deputy prime minister. We were all shocked and asked why he's doing that.
Tuğrul Türkeş being the son of Alparslan Türkeş, traditional icon figure of the ultranationalists and pan-Turkists.
Normally, I mean, we tend to think that it is not logical, but it works in Turkish politics. Turkish politics is still in a very much early romantic nationalist phases. It's always about symbols. So if you play through that, let's say, symbolic gestures, it creates some kind of, let's say, consequences. Just like the Tuğrul Türkeş case, Erdogan knows that. So, of course, this is basically because one objective problem, that is the economy. So Erdogan knows that economy is his weak point, so he must survive through other issues. And what is that? It's nationalism, the Kurdish issue, it is Islam, anti-Westernism, so on and so forth. So it's a very detailed planning, but which is not surprising because we know Erdogan. I mean, I should say that very important fact about Turkish politics. Erdogan is not a person obsessed with ideology. He's very pragmatist. Unfortunately, compared with Erdogan, opposition parties are led by people who are comparatively more obsessed with their idea. Kemalists are obsessed with secularism, so on and so forth. We have the Good Party, a lot of deputies very much obsessed with Kurdish issue. But Erdogan is per se a political beast. So he's not.
Yet his pragmatism has also red lines. He has Islam as his cause.
No doubt, no doubt. He's first Islamist. I said it before, political but Islam. Comparatively, he knows to postpone. Okay, he knows to adapt. The problem is, it is time for the opposition to realize that Turkish politics is now in the phase of tactical actions, not an ideological discussion. It's not time to focus on what is the perfect theoretical or ideological solution to Kurdish problem. It's time to keep the opposition united. It's just like the elections before Trump, US elections.
You brought the subject to opposition, but before that, another question which we should also visit. It is, I asked you what prompted these moves. Did his video meeting with European Union leaders, Michel and von der Leyen, did it have any sort of inspirational effect, Erdogan, to speed up things?
Well, as far as I understand,
because this meeting had nothing absolutely.
That's right.
If you look at the readout, absolutely nothing about human rights, nothing about democracy, values, rule of law, etc.
If I understand Erdogan, he has no concern about European Union. Erdogan's understanding of European Union is very simple. He knows, of course, there will be some cost from European Union, but it will never be serious. This is a conclusion based on not only that meeting, but on the last decade. So for Erdogan, European Union, there will be some problems, there will be some costs, but so in his understanding, the European Union will never come up against Erdogan with a huge, agenda targeting him. Erdogan's main concern
not as long as he challenges European Union in terms of foreign policy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Erdogan will never do that. As far as I understand, Erdogan's main concern is Biden administration, and he's not sure about that. He's giving some sort of complicated signals. Okay, so we are yet to wait to understand what will be Biden's response to Erdogan. Otherwise, Erdogan, I think the last meeting in that regard play a very negative role because Erdogan once again convinced that this is the European Union as it's been in the same stance in the last 5 or 6 years. It's just realpolitik, the refugee issue, some other issues like the one in Libya, so on and so forth. So he's now very clear about European Union, thinking that European Union will never be a stakeholder or aggressive third partner in terms of the fight in Turkish authoritarianism debate. So Erdogan's real concern is, I think he's not sure about U.S. the Biden administration. Yavuz, I can't get your voice.
There are 2 more questions because these are extremely relevant in the context. I think one is, given this picture, how do you see Erdogan's chances to succeed, and not what opposition should do because it's opposition's business, but whether or not opposition will be able to rise to this occasion this time, after all these things that happen. That is, I think, more important than what they should do.
Well, Erdogan's chance is going to be determined by several independent dynamics. One is economy. So we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, economy is giving very bad signals. So first, it's about economy. So I cannot speculate on that. Normally, I would say that economy is going to be reason that Erdogan should fail. But sometimes ideology may defeat economic factors in Turkish politics. So I put it here. When it comes to opposition parties, as I told, it depends on their ability to keep that bloc united, to be tactical, okay? Postponing their ideological differences, which is a fact actually raised by Demirtas in his, I think, most latest letter from prison. He proposed
Selahattin Demirtas jailed pro-Kurdish HDP co-leader.
Co-leader. Yes. He invited the opposition parties to make a consensus over just 4 or 5 basic principles and keep fighting Erdogan. I think this is a very rational scenario. Because in this case, there are some small groups within each party, within Kemalist CHP, the moderate E party, very much obsessed with ideology. So probably looking at them, Erdogan thinks that he can go through them. And some deputies, again, within the opposition parties, gives the image that they can stop cooperating because of such cultural issues. So if we are talking about whether Erdogan is a succeed or not, it's first about economy, but it's up on how the opposition parties, able to keep that bloc united or not. It depends. It is possible they can keep doing it, because despite many problems, we should be also frank to them. They stay united in the last 2 or 3 years. I don't know the exact date to explain their beginning, but they should keep postponing those problems. They should act in a tactical way. So they should realize that their alliance is to stop Erdogan. It is not to solve some historical problems about Kemalism, about Kurdish nationalism. And they should also realize that Erdogan will come up with other agenda items, okay, to target that, let's say, critical, sensitive points, creating some more rifts within the opposition parties. So it depends mainly on economy and the ability of opposition parties keeping this bloc united.
Okay, last question. When is the next critical moment? Some observers see these speeded up moves as a preparation for early elections. I don't agree with them. I think that this is too early for any sort of early elections, because he has still some other issues on the agenda, because he has to amend radically the election law, etc., etc. But given the escalation, any critical moment is up on the agenda. It seems imminent. What is the next critical moment?
By critical moment, you mean
like a turning, like a curve, another sort of escalation, another.
I would say Erdogan has in mind a plan to reorganize politics and the state structure in a way which will secure his survival even in an election, no matter what how economy is bad. So probably we're gonna observe a series of let's say changes in Turkish politics. So Erdogan, maybe some of them will be very radical, some of them will seem to us as, let's say, normal. But my expectation from Erdogan is he will be dealing with a chain of changes, okay? He's gonna try to change the university system, the whole judiciary, the electoral system. For example, he never tried for an election before he completely changed the supreme body of the body that supervises elections, okay?
Supreme Board of Elections, yes.
That's right. So from now on, Erdogan should create a perfect hegemonic state structure which will minimize any chance for Erdogan, which will make things difficult for Erdogan's survival. So instead of a radical step, I expect a chain of decisions. Okay, I think we have seen some of them in the last 2 days, such as changing the borders of some provinces, which is very rare in Turkish history. Okay, so probably it's because of gerrymandering, because of security reasons. So
he does it by decree, by the way.
That's right, but you know that this is very, very rare in Turkish history. It's a very, normally I should say that it's a very high level change in the Turkish traditional state mentality. So it could be about media. He could come up with some kind of regulations on internet, for example. So rather than expecting a radical change, I think we should expect a chain of complicated decisions,
step by
step, that Erdoğan one day will be satisfied that, okay, it's time for elections, okay, or it's time for local elections, I don't know. Because we know that for the time being, it's really early for elections because the state is not ready for such a hegemonic strategy plus economy.
Erdoğan is not ready.
Erdoğan is not ready. I think we should wait for that chain of, let's say, actions in a gradual manner.
And so far, despite claims otherwise, he and his partner Bahçeli seem to be in control of the entire process. Do you agree?
Of course, I agree, and in a very unusual way. Even Bahçeli has no formal position. I mean, he's a member of parliament, but he's acting as a statesman. For example, his tweets are taken by state officials as
directives.
So this is also represents this is also against hegemonic authoritarianism, because in hegemonic structures, state becomes hybrid, which means it's both formal and informal. So the formal analysis of Turkey is no longer satisfactory. You should try to understand the son-in-law, for example, Bahçeli, and probably somehow Bahçeli is influential on security stuff as well, because after that tweet, we have seen the police in the parliament, and the speaker of parliament perfectly responded in a positive way that tweet. So we should try to understand those informal balances. So state in Turkish state, not simply as it is written in the constitution, it is de facto, let's say, relations, including the nationalists around, including Mr. Bahçeli himself. We should think Bahçeli as, it's difficult to formulate that. Even sometimes he acts as a co-president, if I may use that.
Sometimes co-president and vice president.
Vice president, that's right. So he's a man all guys acting in state should care about this guy. Okay, this is not a typical leader of another party, but he's the power sharing in terms of the ideological structure, in terms of foreign policy, and also even judiciary, for example, because that tweet was very clear order to Turkish judiciary and police.
So your conclusion in your analysis brings us closer, tangential actually, to the phrase or definition coined by or reminded by Professor Hamit Bozaslan, cartel state, a state formation, linked with hegemonical rule,
formal and informal,
formal or informal, with a lot of stakeholders acting in sync with each other for their interests. So, but that's another discussion. We can discuss this later on. But it is surely a sort of a cartel-like structure that we are facing. All right. So thank you very much for this conversation, Gökhan.
My pleasure.
Old and New Turkey. This dramatic series of changes will certainly provide us a lot more material for our next conversation. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.